Yo, Shortbox Nation, this is Botter, and I'm here to tell you right now that con season starts early this year with the return of Northeast Florida's premier anime, comic book, and sci-fi event, Collective Con. That's right, Northeast Florida's largest pop culture convention returns for its 10th year on March 8th through the 10th at the Prime Osborne Center in Jacksonville, Florida. 10 years of Collective Con, they're pulling all the stops out to make sure this is a can't-miss event. And the guest list they got going, don't even get me started on the guest list. I mean, they've got A-list celebrity guests and voice actors from some of your favorite movies, anime, and video games like Elijah Wood and Sean Ashton, Ray Park, Trisha Helfer, Ross Marquand, Max Middleman, and Bo-Katan herself will be there, Katie Sackhoff. Tell me what other convention is giving you the opportunity to meet Frodo and Sam from Lord of the Rings, Darth Maul, and One Punch Man all under the same roof. Only at Collective Con. And if you're looking to get some of your favorite comics signed, or if you want to get an original sketch from some of the best comic artists in the world, well, you're in luck, because there'll be plenty of comic and creator guests there, like DC comic artist extraordinaire Clay Mann, Harvey Award-nominated illustrator John Taylor Christopher, Marvel and DC cover artist Chris Stevens, and acclaimed Star Wars author Timothy Zahn. They'll all be at Collective Con this year. And if you're looking to bring the family, or if you want to make a weekend out of it, you're in luck, because there'll be so much going on at Collective Con that weekend in the form of vendors, fan panels, video game tournaments, cosplay contests, after parties, and a bunch of fan events. You can purchase single and 3-day weekend passes now using the link in this episode's show notes, or by going to collectivecon.com to book your tickets and hotel. Buy your tickets now, and I'll see you at Collective Con, March 8th through the 10th. Now let's start the show. Can you share a piece of valuable advice that you give to aspiring artists, comic creators, whatever it may be, looking to break into the industry? Maybe something that reflects something that you wish someone would have told you as you were trying to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, I think if there's anything of value that I can offer to the comic book industry in general, I think people are shocked when they realize, like, I still hold down a full-time job, and I just made a 224-page book in 2 years. Like, you know, I hit my deadline, and that's a normal rhythm in the publishing world. They didn't have to give me extra time, you know. And one of the main messages I try to give other creatives is like, hey, you can do this. You know, stop acting like, you know, if this isn't my day job, I could never do this for a living, or I could never find success. It's just not true, you know. The truth is that you got to cut out your social media. You got to cut out your distractions. You need to sit down and focus, you know. And a lot of it is that we waste a lot of time on things that don't matter that much to us.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Shortbox Podcast, Season 7.
The Shortbox Podcast was recorded before a live internet audience.
Yo, Shortbox Nation, welcome back. We've got a special bonus episode for you this week. So, new friends and first-time listeners, good timing on your part. Welcome to the show. You're now tuned into the Shortbox Podcast. Thanks for joining us. My name is Botter, and today I'm bringing you an excellent conversation with Michael Regina. He's a graphic novelist and the creator of the webtoon featured comic Adamsville, and he's also got a brand new graphic novel called The Sleepover. It's coming out through Penguin Random House on October 12th. Now, this interview was made possible in part by the Jacksonville Public Library, so a big shout out to Allison McCarty and Amanda Marin, who were kind enough to invite me to moderate the Lit Chat panel featuring Michael. With that said, let's get this episode started right now. Hello, Jacksonville Public Library and everyone joining us today. My name is Botter Milligan, and I'll be your moderator for tonight's Lit Chat panel. I'm the host of the Shortbox Podcast, a comic book and pop culture podcast started in 2012 that's still going strong with weekly episodes to this day. I'll be bringing you a great conversation with Michael Regina. He's a graphic novelist and creator of the webtoon featured comic Adamsville. He's also got a brand new graphic novel called The Sleepover coming out through Penguin Random House on October 12th. With that out the way, let's go and welcome our guest of honor, Jacksonville Public Library, and everyone. Let's give a warm welcome to Michael Regina by unmuting his video.
I'll start it. I'm up.
Hey, Michael, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing well, Mike. I've been looking forward to chatting with you all week.
Yeah, man, me too. I'm excited.
It's always nice to meet Jacksonville based talent, that's doing big things on a large scale.
Yeah, it's exciting to finally get to this place where those sorts of things are coming together.
Well, if I'm to understand it correctly, you've been drawing comics since the third grade. I don't even think I was able to properly write my ABC still in the third grade. But do you remember your first conscious exposure to comics, or do you remember one specifically, or maybe a moment that locked you in as a lifelong fan?
Yeah, I mean, well, for comics, it was sort of two events. So the first comic I ever remember like owning and looking at was Batman: A Death in the Family. So the death of Jason Todd, and I still got it up on one of these shelves behind me, and so it just sort of stuck me. I'm not quite sure why my parents let me get that one because it's fairly brutal. But
I was going to say it's a very morbid start to your comic book journey.
It was pretty dark, but yeah, something about it really stuck with me, and I was always into drawing and stuff, but I don't think I had like ever put the pieces together that like, wait, I can draw my own comics. And it was really in the third grade when I was on a bus going to school. This kid who was sitting next to me had written and drawn his own comic. And I was just like, wait, what is this? And he was explaining to me how he did it. And I mean, from that minute on, it was like, no looking back, this is what I want to do. And so I went home that night, bought a pad of paper and pen, and been drawing comics ever since.
Do you have a particular maybe writer or artist that has served as inspiration for you throughout the years?
Well, in my adult life, it's probably Kazu Kibuishi, who does the Amulet books for Scholastic.
Who gave you a very good compliment on the actual cover of The Sleepover, I noticed.
Yes. Yeah, he's become a good friend as well, which is pretty cool. It was Amulet that sort of made me go from creating stuff that was more adult oriented and focusing more on kid oriented material, or more all ages, I guess would be a more appropriate way of putting it. So it was from there. I was just like, I just want to do this. I think this would be a lot of fun to make sort of all ages material instead of the superhero sort of thing, which is what, traditionally, if you live in the United States, that was, if you wanted to make comics, that's what you had to do, and it was sort of seeing Amulet and realizing, oh, I can tell different kinds of stories. And this is kind of finding its way into the mainstream in a way that it had never really done before.
I'm glad you brought up that delineation and kind of common conception when it comes to comic books, especially American comic books, because you're seeing that conversation take place in a lot more, not only just like podcasts, but also outlets that write about comic books that, we're in this day and age where that term comic books, especially American comic books, has definitely expanded. You've got to kind of consider different formats and genres when talking about comic books. And that includes, YA titles, which are starting to make up a majority of that market share of like those books and titles that end up on like the best of or the most sold comic books. But that also includes like manga and even webtoons,
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's exciting. It's, it used to be what comic books were as like, well, it's superheroes, and really, and they would talk about it, comics as a genre unto itself, and it's not. It's a medium, but you can tell any kind of story in it. And the United States is just sort of kind of catching up to the rest of the world that it's like, oh yeah, we can just tell whatever kind of story we want to tell here. So it's exciting because a lot of creators just don't want to tell superhero stories, and there's nothing wrong with them, but there's, we're finally just getting to where we're telling cool stories using comics as our main medium.
Now speaking about comics, do you have a comic shop that you go to, or any comics that you're regularly buying or picking up?
Not a lot right now. So what I end up doing a lot of is buying the trades.
Trade.
And most of it's not because I like individual issues, but I lose them like all the time because they're not. So I finally just got to the point I was like, I'd rather just wait for the trade paperback and put it on my bookshelf. But yeah, there's a few titles that I'm keeping up with currently. And then I've got, a few that have sort of already ended. I'm a big fan of mostly Image stuff. I like a lot of their titles.
Image has gone through such an amazing transformation, I'd say, as in the last 10 years, maybe, when you're thinking about like expanding outside of just superhero titles and taking in and accepting more independent creators to tell their own stories, because when you think of Image, it started out in that, 90s boom, all superheroes. Now, you've got stories from, a plethora of not only authors, but also touching on different genres and different things like that.
Yeah. I mean, currently I'm really into Daniel Warren Johnson stuff. So I just read Extremity, read
Amazing.
both volumes of that, just finished Murder Falcon last week.
Murder Falcon is the first time I read that, I didn't know what I was getting into, but I remember reading it. I remember reading it on a plane, and by the time I got done, I was like hiding like my tears. I was like, man, this is a really touching story.
It's so good. And I mean, and he's just ridiculous as an artist. It's he's currently the guy I'm looking at the most and going like, hey, there's these weaknesses in my art that I want to fix, and he's kind of doing them well. I mean, obviously he draws much more realistically than I'm aiming for my audience, but his sense of energy and composition and like, it's just so good, and so like, I think the next one I'll read is his Wonder Woman Dead Earth series.
It's fantastic. And I'm enjoying, because that was released in like oversized kind of magazine format, so you get a lot more. Yeah. It's even collected in that kind of oversized magazine format. So you get a lot more, art. And I think it only helped enhance his that energy and that dynamic sense of storytelling that he's got.
That's cool. Like I didn't know that it was printed that way. I mean, we're talking to the library. I use the Hoopla service a ton. For those of you who don't use Hoopla, it's awesome. Like just so many good comics on there.
It's my favorite hidden gem that has been hammered into me by so many friends, and I finally decided to jump on the bandwagon last year, and I was like, what was I doing? What? Yeah, it's a fantastic.
I mean, it's, if there's a book I really love, I'll go buy. And a lot of times I'm just like, I just want to read a new comic. And so I just hop on to Hoopla. I'm like, and all the new Image trades are there. And, it's, so kudos to the library. Thank you for that service. But I didn't realize they printed it that way. Like, I was a huge Harrow County fan, which is right there. And I had read them through the library, and I loved them so much. I went and bought the library editions. So they're the big oversized printings.
Speaking about Daniel Warren Johnson, you both kind of occupy an interesting space that I don't think you see a lot of comic creators occupy, which is kind of an auteur kind of role. You single-handed, the duties of writing, drawing, coloring, lettering, all kind of fall on you. And I was curious, if you were to think about other auteurs in that same space, who are some other names that come to mind that you respect or, look to for inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one because, obviously, I mean, even I kind of use help. We have coloring assistants and stuff who come in, but obviously I'm thinking writing and drawing it. And so, Kazu obviously comes to mind. I'm a huge fan of a couple of Japanese guys like Naoki Urasawa, who made Monster, 20th Century Boys, and 20th Century Boys, good. He writes and draws them, and obviously Akira, Katsuhiro Otomo. And then locally, or in the United States, a lot of it would be a lot of the kids' graphic novel stuff. So you see Mike Mayhack, I'm looking up on my shelf trying to think of them off the top of my head so I don't forget it. Stephen McCraney, Chris Grine, a lot of my all ages, other writers that were all creating stuff. A lot of those guys, it's pretty rare in the traditional publishing world, meaning like Penguin, Scholastic, that the writer is not also the artist. So that's pretty much the norm. Whereas even places like Image and stuff, it's more of like you have a writer and you have an artist, and they might be co-creators, but it's not really one voice. Jeff Lemire makes some great stuff, like The Underwater Welder was great, and obviously Sweet Tooth.
You kind of proved my point, this theory I've got, where as fellow collectors who have bookshelves like yours, mine's over there, so you can't see it in frame, but I have this theory that most of us buy the really nice collected editions, because even though we've already read it, whether it be digital or single issues, but we buy those nice hardcovers and things, so that way we can reference, anytime someone asks, so what do you like? It's such an easy snapshot of like, I apparently like this book enough to buy it, and this and that.
Right. I mean, I'm a huge, this isn't comics, but I'm a huge M. Night Shyamalan fan. And I, you could say what you want about his films. He has, it's all over the place and sometimes, but I love the guy because he is an auteur. He's a writer. He's a director. He doesn't make franchise films. He's, whatever you see is generally out of his own head. Same with like Christopher Nolan. And so those guys I tend to gravitate towards a lot because I think of myself more as a writer, not a comic book artist. I draw so that I can tell the stories I have in my head. And the better I get at drawing, the better I am at telling that story. But I'm focusing much more on being a better writer because I think a lot of artists, they underscore how important the writing is because they just want to draw cool stuff. And I'm like, man, if you don't have a story worth telling that's well told, no one's going to care about how pretty the art is down the line,
No, that's fair enough. And speaking about, your admiration for M. Night Shyamalan, I noticed when reading through the sleepover preview that you provided, which thank you, by the way.
Yeah.
Or even looking at your work in Adamsville, elements from the horror and mystery genre seems to be a very prominent theme in your work. What movies or books do you pull from or personally reference to help you get in that space of mind?
Yeah. So if you could see around me, you would see a Jaws poster straight over me here. It's my favorite movie of all time. Right over to here is a Aliens poster, and then a Stranger Things poster right there. So, I mean, those sort of, I like, and if I could actually get an M. Night Shyamalan poster that wasn't one of the giant oversized ones, I would. But like, yeah, Jaws, Aliens, Signs, Unbreakable, all that sort of stuff. Like a lot of what I see, excuse me, good horror, and there's not a lot that I resonate with in comics. Mm-hmm. It tends to be more graphically violent than I care for in comics. Like it's less suspense and it's more played up for, I don't know, just, over the top violence or something. But I tend to pull a lot of my inspiration more from those films where it handles the horror in a more tasteful, thriller, suspenseful sort of way. So Alfred Hitchcock, M. Night Shyamalan, Steven Spielberg, scary stuff, that sort of thing. Poltergeist.
Is it ever challenging to create kid-friendly and younger reader-friendly material as an adult? And how do you balance, or how do you approach like your adult sensibilities and perspectives, like from ever clashing for your process or your material? Yo, this is Botter. Sorry for interrupting this episode, but I'll keep it brief. I wanted to let you know about a massive sale we have going on over at the Shortbox store on all of our merchandise and apparel. That's theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com. You can now save 20% off your entire order using the discount code YOO, Y-O-O. So if you've been waiting for the right time to finally buy that gauntlet snapback, or if you ever wanted to buy any of the shirts you see me wear on the podcast, well, now's your chance to get them for a steal. We still have a few sizes left of everything, but they won't last long, and once they're gone, they are gone. And then I mentioned that all of our apparel is screen printed on high quality material. None of that heat transfer or direct to garment stuff. Our shirts are some of the most comfortable ones you'll ever wear, and the hats look even better in person. So wear your support for the Shortbox Nation proudly, knowing that you're going to look damn good doing it. Get to theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com as soon as you can, and don't forget to use that discount code YOO, Y-O-O, to save 20% off your entire order. All of this information can be found in this episode's show notes if you want to get there faster. Thanks for not pressing fast forward. Now back to the show.
Ooh, that's a really good question, man. I don't overly, one of my things that I think about is that we don't tend to be aware of when something isn't in something, but we are aware when it is. So what I mean is like I love Christopher Nolan's movies, but he doesn't use a lot of language in his movies. You would never think of it, but like I was watching Inception, I think there's like 2 curse words in the whole movie, and so he just tells really good stories. And whereas I think if it's there often, people think about it, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it sort of elevates the maturity of the material and makes it harder for kids to get into it. But I think I just don't include it, and I don't think people notice it, if that makes sense. But there is some stuff in the sleepover that I was like pretty nervous that I was like, man, they might ask me to tone this back a notch or two, and thankfully I wasn't asked to. It just some of the scary elements towards the very end of the book that I was worried that I might get asked to tone down.
You know, when I looked at, your website and what I could find online, you went from successfully crowdfunding your graphic novels on Kickstarter, which is, I mean, no small feat of itself.
Yeah.
I've interviewed a good majority of comic creators who go that route, and regardless of how much fame or how much weight their name holds, they'll even admit, man, Kickstarter and crowdfunding is just a different beast in itself.
Yeah.
But I look at you, and now you're having a 224 page book with the sleepover that will soon be published by Penguin Random House. Can you talk a little bit more about what was the catalyst of the sleepover being picked up? And I mean, was it a pitch that you came to them, or vice versa?
Yeah. So I mean, the goal with even this Adamsville was to get it picked up by a publisher, but sort of I realized maybe 10 years ago that no one was going to give me a book deal until I could prove I could do it. And so I went and made Adamsville, the first book, with no book deal. I didn't publish it online. I didn't publish it as a webcomic. I just kind of quietly made it in private, because I didn't want the pressure of, the fact that it wasn't catching an audience to make me feel like, oh, this isn't working, I shouldn't continue. So I just kind of got into a mindset of like, I'm just going to make books and then I'll put them out there in the world when I'm done. I don't really care if it's gaining an audience in the meantime. They need to see the book and then know whether or not it's a good book, So I just kind of made that, but then no one picked it up. And actually I got a lot of, stuff like, this looks too much like this guy. I just wasn't matured yet as an artist, and I was still figuring it out. So I just went and did the Kickstarter so that I had a book that got published. But then after the third Adamsville book, I just sort of decided that I was like, you know what? I've proven I can do this. I finished a trilogy of books. I did it through webtoons and all that. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to take a year off and I'm going to focus on getting better. And I'm going to try to think about where I need to improve as an artist that would be more appealing to a publisher. I'm going to focus on my writing and the appeal of that, and then see if I can come up with an idea that really resonates with me. And the sleepover idea just kind of came to me out of nowhere. And I just very quickly was like, this is the idea. And I spent maybe 3 months putting a pitch together, and then started sending that pitch around to agents, got an agent, and then that agent got me over to Penguin.
I'm glad you brought up taking that time to, be honest and critical with yourself, and thinking like, and allowing yourself time to get better. It reminds me of something. I recently interviewed Matt Lesniewski. He's got a book actually out through Image where he's writing for the first time. He's normally just drawing, but he wanted to take a stab at writing. And I'd asked him, what would be some advice he'd give to aspiring comic creators as well. And it kind of it matches somewhat of what you're sharing. He had stated, to draw and write or create comic books as if no one's ever going to pick it up. Because if you truly love the medium, then you're doing it for, your own kind of personal satisfaction and things like that. But his advice was start with a 1-page comic, put that away, do a 5-page comic next. And then, start elevating till you get to that, the traditional 22-page comic book. And and he's saying by the time that you hit that 22-page comic book, you'll be able to look back at that 1-page, that 5-pager, and you'll see a drastic difference in improvement. But you have to be able to account for that time. I think a lot of folks think that, if they can draw a really good, pitch, then, they'll be able to magically kind of land at a publisher. But, there's a lot more work that goes into that and fine tuning your craft.
Yeah. I mean, when you're getting the book deal is just the start of the race. It's not, you're just now, it's like the gun went off and it's like, all right, here we go, and so if you have not built that endurance up, it's going to be a really overwhelming experience, and I sort of went from the angle of like, I can look at Adamsville book 1 and see that it is not the art is not as high as I know I could do at the time. But I was not focused on making it perfect. I was like, my goal with this is to finish. I want to finish, and then when I finished that, I was like, all right, now let's work on improving on these things. And then I just kept getting better on areas. And then I sort of have a mentality that when I get finished with the book, I kind of go back into like a training camp mode where it's like, okay, I've got like a 3 to 4 or 5 month window where no one's expecting anything from me. It's what I'm in right now. And all I'm going to do is go, okay, what areas do I feel like I'm not as strong in? I'm going to go work on those, because it's much harder to sort of pump the brakes when you're in full production on a book and stop and say, let me fix this area of my art that I'm unhappy with, or whatever the case might be. It's more like you got to turn this thing around. It's not the time to experiment and try new things. That's what I'm in now is, what areas do I need to improve on? How do I need to improve them? And that's why I'm looking at a lot of Daniel Warren Johnson. I'm like, I need to get better at this dynamic composition stuff, because he's super good at it.
Well, that sounds like some really fun practice, though. If being able to read a bunch of really good comic books and kind of take certain things and look at your own style, that sounds like great training.
Yeah, it's fun.
So coming from running several successful crowdfunding campaigns to working with a major imprint like Penguin Random House, what do you like about crowdfunding, and what are some key lessons you took away from that experience versus, say, working with a major publisher?
Yeah. Do you want the honest answer?
Come on, Michael. That's all the people want is honesty.
Yes. Well, here's the honest answer. I'm thankful crowdfunding exists, because it helped me launch a career that I don't think I would have had otherwise. When it was done, when I finished my third Adamsville, I said, I never want to do this again. And that's why I was like, I just want a publisher. I don't want to do this again. Now, part of that is just that I have a day job still. I still, have a job that I pull 8 hours a day, and then I got to go home and create another book and work on my next title with Penguin. I had a 2-book deal with them, so I've got to work on that. And it was just the fulfillment and the managing of all of that stuff. And then the stress of just sort of like, what if I don't get the money? Now I can't publish it. I just spent all this time making it, and now it's not off the ground. Like, I just didn't want to deal with that again.
That's fair.
So I'm thankful it's there. And I encourage anyone who has an idea to use it. But there's a lot of value in working with a publisher there, and honestly, I learned just so much more having like an editor and a team behind me, because when you're kind of crowdsourcing, like no one's telling you whether your book's any good really, or providing constructive feedback on what the writing should be. And whereas I think the Sleepover was stronger, because I would send a script into my editor and he'd be like, I really think you need to improve on this. I really, this thing doesn't make a lot of sense. Can you fix that? And that sort of checks and balances. It just fits my temperament much better. It's got its drawbacks too, but overall, I really enjoyed the process much more than this. And like I said, thankful it's there. I might do it again at some point, but I would like not to. That's the honest answer.
What would you say is probably what was the most maybe enlightening criticism, constructive criticism at that you received from working with an editor or a team at Penguin Random House? And maybe something that, had you not been working with a team, you probably would not have learned or known about your work or process.
Well, within the Sleepover, one of the biggest things I can point to is the book was going pretty smoothly from the pickup to when the book came out, to when a book got picked up by Penguin. But one of the things my editor was sort of vocalizing was some concerns about who and what the monster in the Sleepover was. At the time, I was sort of basing it on an actual legend that exists in reality from Filipino culture. And because I based the Sleepover in large part on my neighborhood friends. And a lot of my neighborhood friends were Filipino. And I had come up with this idea, and I'd seen this monster, and I was like, oh, that'd be perfect for the book. And the more, and he was sort of like, I think that's cool if you can make it work, but maybe it's too restrictive. Maybe there's another way to look into this. And I fought it really hard because I tried to make it work. And then eventually I was like, it's just not working. And we had to kind of go back, and I had to redesign this monster from the ground up. And I think that ended up being for the better in the end, not because the other idea was a bad idea or it wouldn't have been cool. It's just that when you're making a story, what you really need is for every element to serve the themes of your story, what the story is actually about, And that was where I was running into trouble, is because I was really tightly holding on to this idea, wanting to do it. I couldn't just let the story do what it needed to do, and sort of having that editor sit down and be like, is there another option here, something else we can choose? Ended up, I think, working out for the better. And I'm not sure I would have stopped and gone a different direction if I wouldn't have had that feedback. I would have just kept, plowing ahead.
Yeah. Sometimes you need that outside perspective to kind of, challenge you in that way. Because to your point, you get so deep into it, you can't see the forest for the trees, and you need someone to kind of pull you back out and, give you that bigger picture of like, well, this book is meant to sell, we've got to hit, these check marks and things like that.
Right. Yeah. And most of this one was, we wanted to be respectful of what this creature meant to the Filipino culture. And I wanted to too. But the issue was that I had to tweak aspects of what it was to make it fit my story more, to the point where I was like, I feel like I'm tweaking too many things, and I would rather leave it alone and us go do something else. I just felt like, maybe I'm not the person to tell that story, or this isn't the story for that thing. And I've seen some other books that have taken that legend and done it, and they've had really no respect for it. They just go off and do some random thing. Yeah, it's fine. I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah, fair enough. So in the Jack's Public Library blog that coincides with this lit chat, you shared some of your recommended reading and watching as well. But one of the books that piqued my interest was Deep Work by Carl Newport, which references the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task. Do you have a strict creative process that you stick to when drawing or writing or creating?
Wish I was better at it, but I am getting better at it.
I feel you on that.
Yeah, I mean, with writing, what I try to do is you just get into a rhythm. So I try to wake up around 6 a.m. ish, and usually the house is still asleep for a little while. Thankfully, I work from home and all these things. So like my day job desk is literally behind me. And so I'll usually sit down here and I'll write right now I'm in writing. So like I'll write for, about an hour and a half, 2 hours. I just have to leave YouTube off. I block, social media is blocked from my computer. I can't look at Twitter or Facebook on my computer or on my phone. It's only allowed on one device and for 10 minutes a night. And I just have to pull myself away from those things because they are such an attention hog. Even YouTube on my computer, I have to use filters that keep me from kind of falling into that YouTube, hole of we'll autoplay this next thing. So those are the sorts of things I have to do to help me stay focused. And so that if I'm sitting down, I'm being very intentional about this is what I'm here to do for the next couple of hours. And it makes life better if I can fit all that in within that time period. So yeah, a lot of it's get rid of your social media, stay off of YouTube, and then just sit down and make whatever it is you're working on your focus for that period of time, even if it's only 30 minutes or something.
I could definitely learn from that. In preparing for this panel, I had, I was working on my laptop. I had maybe 7, 8 tabs, which is light work for me. Normally it's double digits. And my girlfriend walked over and she was like, "Are you working on that script or the panel?" I was like, "Yeah, of course. You don't see all these tabs?" She was like, "Well, what's the Twitter tab got to do with all this?"
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's the problem is you just end up scrolling for forever. And you're like, what am I doing?
Exactly. You look down 1 minute and then you look up. You're like, oh man, it's time to do this. It's an hour past already.
Yeah, it's funny because Cal Newport wrote a follow up to that to Deep Work called Digital Minimalism that I would really recommend too, where he really examined kind of the negative effects of social media on people and how it actually really reduces those who are working in creative fields and knowledge fields from being able to do their best work. So I'd recommend his whole library. I celebrate his whole catalog.
I'll check it out.
It's really good. Yeah, it's good stuff, man.
So I noticed that you also conduct school visits where you talk a bit about your career and how you create comics with young students. I imagine it's probably your prime key audience. I mean, do you ever learn anything from them? And what has been the most impactful visit for you? Do you have one that kind of comes to mind?
Ooh, that's a good question. Honestly, what I learn a lot from them is probably something parents wouldn't like to hear, which is that they can handle more than we give them credit for. And so I think there's a desire, especially when we make material for kids, that we pull punches, Like we're afraid, and I don't mean like in vulgarity or violence. That's not what I mean. I mean that you're not honest about the way the world works. A lot of these kids come from some really rough places. And when I sit down and I talk with teachers and I hear some of these stories, it breaks your heart, that they're going through this. And but then realizing that they already have such a mature view of the world, and it's good to talk to them on that level, just in a mature manner, even if they're younger. That you don't talk down to them, you talk up to them. And then what I've learned from that too is that mostly what I want to give to them is, even though we're talking about monsters and all this sort of scary stuff, at the end of the day, what I want them to be left with is hope. Hope that things can be better. And so, I don't typically like to create horror that ends in a downer. I like to create horror that that's one of the things I love about M. Night's work is he doesn't leave you in a bad place. There's usually a sense of catharsis at the end, an idea that like, hey, we live with a greater sense of purpose. You have a greater meaning, these sorts of things. And so, I think, that they need more hope talked to them, and they need to be spoken to with respect, because I gather that a lot because they'll respond to things that I would never think that they watch. Like even something like Jaws. I'm like, yeah, I've seen Jaws, and I'll be like talking to like second graders, and they're like, yeah, I love it. And meanwhile, I'm looking at my kids who are like in fifth grade and stuff. I'm like, are they ready for Jaws? Meanwhile, I saw it when I was like 3 years old.
Yeah. That's a really good answer. I appreciate the insight. That was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, so you also have a really good blog on your website titled "How to Finish Graphic Novels and Have a Full-Time Job," which I recommend that for anyone that might be applicable to give it a read. But for those that haven't read it yet, can you share a piece of valuable advice that you give to aspiring artists, comic creators, whatever it may be, looking to break into the industry? Maybe something that reflects something that you wish someone would have told you as you were trying to get your foot in the door.
Yeah. I think if there's anything of value that I can offer to the comic book industry in general, I think people are shocked when they realize, like, I still hold down a full-time job, and I just made a 224-page book in 2 years. Like, I hit my deadline, and that's a normal rhythm in the publishing world. They didn't have to give me extra time, and one of the main messages I try to give other creatives is like, hey, you can do this, stop acting like, if this isn't my day job, I could never do this for a living, or I could never find success. It's just not true. The truth is that you got to cut out your social media. You got to cut out your distractions. You need to sit down and focus, and a lot of it is that we waste a lot of time on things that don't matter that much to us. So, even stuff like playing video games for hours a night. I made a decision at one point where I was just like, I would rather be a creator than a consumer. So I would rather create things for others, and then I'll let the other people, be consuming. But I had to learn to be fast, and it just became very clear to me that if I ever wanted to work in a professional sense, I needed to get my act together from a time perspective. And a lot of that was just learning how to be fast. So what I would say is I know a lot of artists are afraid to pick up their speed because they're like, oh, I'll lose my quality of my art. And that is true. But what will happen is over time, your skill will catch up with your speed. And so focus on the speed. That's fine. Let the quality be not so great, because finished is better than perfect. So finish the product, and then you try it again, and you just keep getting better and better and better. But that speed is so important in comics anyway, because these books take too long if you don't get after it. I was making web comics before then, and the sort of normal rhythm, I don't know if you kind of recall this in like the early 2010s and stuff. It was like you publish like one page a week.
Yeah.
And with stuff. And I was just like, this is insane. It's going to take me 4 years to make a 200-page book. And I just couldn't do it. I was like, I've got to find a better speed, And I guess that if you do 2 pages a week, you'll still hit a 200-page book in 2 years. So it's not too bad.
I like what you said about, finish is better than perfect. I recently had recently had a chance to talk to Tyler Kirkham. He's a comic book artist. He's been in the game for like 20 years. He's worked for every publisher you can think of: Marvel, DC, Image, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd asked him the same question too, and he recalled when he first broke in via Top Cow Studios in I think Los Angeles, but it's run by Mark Silvestri, another comic book legend. But he was telling me, it was a culture shock in the sense that he wanted to impress Mark Silvestri, who was his artist, role model. But that would mean drawing for a lot longer, like really spending time on every detail, every page. But at the same time, he was entering this professional comic space where he also had to answer to editors that, were not here for, late deadlines or, they needed him to hit goals. And it was a culture shock kind of for him to kind of learn how to balance that. But in the end, he did end up favoring the editors a little more because he knew, one, they were the ones that were going to give him that job and et cetera, et cetera. But he learned kind of like a balancing act from that experience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a quote from Naoki Urasawa. If you guys have never read his books, I highly recommend them. But there's an old documentary with him, and the final thing is someone says to him, like, what is a professional? And he says, a professional is somebody with a deadline, and with that deadline does the best they can to deliver a good performance. And so, I just try my best to deliver on time. And when I went to Webtoons, that really got intense because you had weekly deadlines. And it's really tough, and it can break you if you're not ready for it. And so I think a lot of people want to have these opportunities. They want to become a professional comic book artist. They want to have these big book deals, whatever, but they've not done the work necessary to be proven for that opportunity. You've got to spend the time learning what it means to be a professional at this. And I don't mean like professional in the hoity-toity sense. I just mean like the logistical reality of you have a deadline and you need to turn something in. And if all you can do is say, well, I want to make comics, and you don't make comics, then you're not prepared for that opportunity, So a lot of what I think the reason the Penguin opportunity came along is I got better, but then I had proven that I could deliver, that if you gave me a deadline, I would hit it.
Logistical reality is a phrase that I will take from this conversation and use it going forward. That is excellently encapsulated. Yes. With that being said, it's 7:40. I know we've got some Q&A to toss to, but I wanted to ask one more question, and it's going to be about the sleepover. It's advertised as perfect for fans of Stranger Things, but I wanted to hear in your words, who would enjoy the sleepover? Who is the audience? If they like X, Y, and Z, they'd also like sleepover in that mentality.
Yeah, well, Stranger Things is a good comparison, but I think it's anyone who just remembers what it's like to be a kid, have good friends, and be afraid for your life. I wanted to put these friends and put them in just like a terrifying situation, and I think people who enjoy a good scary book but want to see a story about friends, and in particular, it's a story about a group of guy friends and how they're that kind of relationship that I had with a lot of my neighborhood friends as kids, where we were there for each other, man. It's kind of very strange, very Stand By Me in that way. That sort of that friendship. There's a comment at the end of Stand By Me where he says, I never had friends again like I did when I was 12. God, does anyone? And it's sort of like this was like my love letter to my friends from when I was 12, so people who enjoy a good scare and want to see kids fight some monsters.
There we go. That's simple and straight to the point, but I think it captures it well. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, man.
With that being said, I think Allison, it sounds like we're okay to turn it over to Q&A.
Yes, absolutely. If you have any questions, drop them right in the chat box for us. Thank you.
And I see Jeremy Yates also chimed in and champions Hoopla as well. Hoopla is amazing. So many comics and graphic novels on there. Co-sign that.
Yes, it's pretty amazing.
And while we wait for questions to start populating, I'll go ahead and insert another one.
Sure.
Because you mentioned, webtoons and that pace and things like that. Outside of just the pace of things, is it critically or vastly different from working on a graphic novel or comment or a comic or et cetera, et cetera?
Oh yeah, very much. And it's one of the reasons why when Adamsville left Webtoons, that a lot of my friends were like, "Oh, are you going to pitch this next thing to them? Are you going to go back to Webtoons with this?" And I said, "No, I don't intend to." And or at least I wouldn't until the book was finished, because it is sort of like produced on that weekly basis. And what I like to do is I like to sit down and write my entire book, figure the entire story out, because I think about my books like a movie script, and kind of one whole idea, and it arcs. And a lot of comics are sort of created like you might like thinking of something like Murder Falcon, for instance. I don't know whether Daniel Warren Johnson wrote it issue to issue, or if he wrote the whole story. My guess is he probably wrote it issue to issue, because that's pretty common. But I don't know how you can account for everything well without writing the whole thing first. And so it felt a lot more, it was just a more enjoyable process. I wrote the whole book, then I thumbnailed the whole book, and then we inked the whole book and colored it. And that can get a little tedious at times, but I knew by the time I was drawing it that it was the story I wanted to tell. You know what I mean? So it's a very different rhythm. Whereas with Webtoons, it's like, I turn these 8 pages around, I got to turn another 8 pages around, I got to turn another. And so it's just, you don't get a chance to sit back and go like, is this all working though? Like, is everything doing what it's supposed to? And so it's different. I compare the two, like my buddy Steven, he creates Space Boy for Webtoons. And I tell him it's like the difference between working on a TV show or a movie. TV shows, they have to crank out episodes. Movies, they spend years making it. And I just like the pace of making a movie better,
Well said. I do see a question that was posted from a Julie Rickow. I apologize if I mispronounced that, but they write, when is the sleepover being released, or is it out?
It comes out on October 12th, so just in time for Halloween. That was our goal, to make it a Halloween release. So not out just yet.
And it'll be, I'm assuming it is available pretty much everywhere?
Yeah, you can pretty much go to any, any place that sells books, and you'll be able to get your hands on it or pre-order it. You can order it from your local shops too. Probably grab it over at some Coliseum Comics or something, or put it on pre-order there.
Yeah. Do you shop at Coliseum?
I do, yeah. If I head over that way, that's usually where I go. I don't have a pull anymore because I stopped carrying the, buying individual issues, but I, take the kids up there pretty regularly.
So you're familiar with Jonathan Sanders?
Yes. Yeah. I love Jonathan.
Yeah. I used to work at that shop when it was Universe of Superheroes, and that's where I met John. And actually, John got me a job at the Cummer Museum because he had a Spider-Man tie on, and I complimented him, and he helped me kind of get in. But yeah, John's a fantastic comic shop manager. And there you have it, Shortbox Nation. If you want to hear the rest of that Q&A, go ahead and check out the full video version of this podcast on the Jacksonville Public Library website. They'll have the full lit chat panel up there. So go ahead and give that a look if you're interested in hearing the rest of the Q&A. And once again, a big shout out to Allison McCarty and Amanda Marin for even giving me the opportunity to chat with Michael in the first place. Let me know what you thought about this episode and what Michael had to share regarding his career and, best practices and advice that he had. I'd love to hear what you thought about all of that. Write a short email. Send it to our inbox at theshortboxjacks@gmail.com, and we'll read it next episode. And speaking of next episode, look, listeners, y'all know it's a dog-eat-dog world out here in these podcast streets. So do us a favor and toss us a bone and hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss any of our new episodes. Next week, Ed and Ashley will be back. We'll be recording another installment of our Shortbox News Edition episodes. That's where we cover all of the latest comic book news and headlines that have occurred in the last couple weeks. So you won't want to miss that, all right? So go ahead and make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app. Come back next Wednesday. And if that's too long for you, we got a bonus podcast series called Pilot's License. We just dropped the Gargoyles episode last week, and we recorded one about the Justice League Unlimited cartoon that'll be coming out in a few weeks. So if you want bonus Shortbox content, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/shortbox. Of course, there's a link for that in our bio. If you want more Shortbox content, that's the way to go. And don't forget about our our Marvel tattoo giveaway. We're giving away 2 free tattoo sessions for a Scotty Young Marvel design. We got all of the pictures and all the rules on our social media pages, so either check out our Facebook or our Instagram for the full details and how you can enter. With all of that finally said, Shortbox Nation, that is the end of this episode. Take care of yourselves. Have a great rest of your week. And please continue to make mine and yours Shortbox. Peace.